hopefully we now have audio and all the technical problems are gone. And so welcome. I'm Noah Bradley, and here with me tonight is Chris Oatley. And we're going to be talking about art and how to be an artist and the miseries and joys that come along with that. So, Chris, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do. Take it away.
This is the longest answer anyone will hear this evening, most likely. No, I'll try and keep it short. I spun my wheels as a freelance illustrator for a few years after graduating from the Columbus College of Art and Design in Columbus, Ohio, and I kind of got derailed artistically and emotionally in college, because that was when the sort of the 2D animation is dead message first kind of appeared. It was the first time it was ever on anybody's grid, and it was when Disney shut down the Florida studio and that kind of thing. So it was kind of the beginning of that whole thing that here we are all these years later still dealing with the same kind of thing.
Yep.
And thank God 2D just won't die.
Nope.
Anyway, the point being, I started school wanting to be a hand-drawn animator, and when that happened, it sort of like rocked my world. And so I just kind of reactively started making an illustration portfolio. And so then, because I wanted to work in animation, and I kind of late in the game made an illustration portfolio, and never really, I don't know. I mean, illustration was weird back then. It's still weird now, but it was weird back then because there was no internet really, really at all, or at least it wasn't part of our lives day to day, and so we had. I didn't have a website or anything like that, and you would still send postcards and mailers and whatever to publishers, and you would try and take trips to New York City and go just drop in on art directors and that kind of thing, and that just is so weird and awkward, and I never really took it seriously. So I did paint a lot, though. That was the thing. I never stopped doing, was painting and painting stories, painting characters in environments and that kind of thing. So anyway, the point is, I struggled, and I did, 4 real freelance jobs over the course of about 2 years, something like that. And this is actually wasn't going to tell the story, but people love the story, so I'll tell it real quick. I worked at the Guitar Center as my kind of day job, and I so wanted to be a professional artist. That was about as much as I knew, because illustration didn't seem to be working out so well, that I was like, I know that no matter what, if I continue to draw and paint and tell visual stories, something is going to click together eventually, and it did. But I was working at the Guitar Center, and we would get half-hour lunch breaks. And it was one of those things where it's like you had to punch into the digital time clock, and you got in big trouble if you were late. And so, and there was one other rule that made it even more exciting and complicated, and that is that, you're on the floor at the front of the store when your lunch break hits, and then you have to go, all the way to the back of the warehouse to clock out, and then you can't leave through the back door for some reason. So you have to leave through the front door. So you have to walk the entire length of the warehouse and the entire show floor and get out, and not get stopped by your boss to ask a question or anything. In other words, lunchtime is not only short, but it's also this sort of Mission Impossible kind of thing in order to get out and really get the most of your precious 30 minutes. So I would, go on lunch, and I would run to the back of the warehouse, clock out, and then sprint back out the front of the store, run to my car, hop in my car. I lived close to the Guitar Center, so I'd drive home, run out of my car into the living room of the house we lived in, And I left my easel and my canvas with whatever painting I was working on at the time set up all the time, round the clock, which my roommates loved. They didn't love it, and I would have had my paints under a cake, one of those Tupperware cake cover things, and I would run in and pull the Tupperware cover off, and my paints are nice and wet, ready to go there, and then I would paint for 15 minutes or whatever the difference was. And then slap the cover back down on the paint, run back to the car, go back, sprint to the back of the warehouse, clock back in just in the nick of time. That's how badly I wanted it, And then I wasn't even working toward a clear goal.
Yeah.
So that's what my life was like then. And then I eventually realized, well, basically I was sitting on the floor of my studio, well, my bedroom / studio in that same house, and one night it was like 3 a.m. I had a freelance gig and I was struggling to come up with an idea for it. And so I sat down and I just started going through all my art books. I had already called in to work the next day and called in sick. So a little bit dishonest, but I was sick of the job. But I called in sick and I was like, okay, it had to be the art director by like noon. That's a whole other, story, which I don't mind telling, but I'll spare you at the moment. But it's about my doing things the wrong way. But anyway, I'm running late, and the deadline is like at noon on Tuesday, and that was a Monday, and I took the day off to work on this illustration. So it's like 3 a.m. I'm trying to get this thing done, delivered by noon, and can't come up with an idea. I'm going through all my art books, and I pull off the shelf The Art of a Bug's Life, which had just come out not too long before, and I'm looking through it and I'm thinking about some of the things that some of the kind of lies that derailed me in college, and that kind of took me off the animation path. And I'm flipping through there and I'm looking at all the work. It's just so gorgeous. And then I flip to the back page and I see the list of all the names of everyone that worked on the movie, and it's like 250 people or something. It's like this huge list of names, and I'm looking at this list and I go, these are all real people. They got jobs. They work at Pixar. They were in school and they were illustrators, and they're there now. And it just, I don't know why, it just hit me, the reality of this long, and I'm like, that's a lot of people. It's like 300 people. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. And so I at that moment decided I need to change course now.
Yeah.
And so I enrolled in graduate school to be a CG animator. That was the second try to become an animator. And fate had something else in mind, I suppose. But tried again and went and enrolled in graduate school and made a film, part of a film. And then my funding ran out. And because I couldn't write a thesis. Ironic, given how much I write now, but I just couldn't get my head around what a thesis was, and I didn't have the patience for it, and on and on. My funding runs out, and it just so happens that I had done a freelance job for Disney because it was like a friend of a friend from school, my friend Steve Galgus, great illustrator, and he had made a recommendation for me to work on one of the direct-to-DVD sequels that Disney was making, and that's actually a whole other long story. But basically, my sort of hodgepodge. I'm a draftsman sort of and a painter sort of, and I also know a lot about CG, and there was something about my like Frankenstein skill set that was right for this job, and they hired me to do the Viz Dev paintings, and accidentally I became a concept artist at Disney.
Nice.
without trying. So
that's a good way to get in the door.
Yeah, I worked there for 4 years, and 4, 5, I don't know. Yeah, like 4 years, I think, something a little bit more, and then I just recently quit and started my own online art school last August, and
nice.
It's been going really well, and we are having a just a stupid amount of fun. It's
Nice.
just it's just ridiculous, and got some great students. They're just amazing, and yeah, we're having a blast. Oh, great.
Good. Yeah, I mean, how has been the transition from working like in-house like that for Disney and now kind of doing your own thing, making your own hours, all that sort of stuff?
Right. Well, because I um, sort of freelanced, and I've freelanced on and off. Like when I was actually kind of going through the transition, when I first got my first gig at Disney, then I was laid off after that gig, and I can't remember, I think like another year or so where I was kind of doing little nickel and dime stuff, and I worked for EA on a couple things, and I can't Hasbro on something, and anyway, I did a bunch of different kinds of odds and end jobs. So I'm kind of I know how that goes and whatever. But I also the longer I was at Disney, the more my lifestyle was becoming what it is now. So it's actually not that different than it was. Some mornings I would go in at 8, and other mornings I'd go in at 11.
Right.
And it just would depend on how much work I was doing on the site and on my site and building my academy and that kind of thing. So I the longer I was there, the more kind of flexible. And as long as I was there for meetings, nobody cared. As long as I got my work done.
Right.
And so it was already kind of becoming this like hodgepodge thing. I'd go on a long lunch and work for a while, and on a blog post or something, and then come back and then paint into the night. So it was already kind of bizarre, but
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, and I like that. I mean, I like. I mean, it can it can end up consuming my life fairly easily. So I have to really watch it. Fortunately, my wife helps to kind of keep me on track, and she sort of plans our social life and that kind of thing. And I do a lot of. I mean, a lot of my friends are in the industry too, so
Mhm.
I spend a lot of time kind of doing both, sort of pontificating about art things and also getting the social itch scratched as well.
Yeah. That is
Um,
one nice thing about having art friends is that
oh yeah,
you kind of do both at the same time.
yeah, it's awesome. That's another great thing about being here, is that you can't spit without hitting, like not just an artist, but like a super talented artist with a resume,
Right.
with an IMDb page,
Yeah.
like just, it's just nuts.
Yeah. It is something living over there. So thanks for the introduction. That was pretty cool to hear. I had never heard your own story, so that was fascinating to hear. I did like
I,
the
I
part. I did like the part about that moment when you realized that real people actually do
yeah,
these jobs. I can actually kind of relate to that. I do remember when I was younger, the old conceptart.org forums back in the day, when all like the really, really good artists were posting on there. I still remember kind of going on there and looking around and realizing this is what these people do for a living. They
yeah,
just they sit in their studios and they make this really, really awesome stuff.
yeah,
And that was kind of the moment when I realized like, wow, you can actually do this kind of stuff for a living.
yeah,
I'd love to do that. And then years later, here I am.
right.
So it's interesting how you make that transition. So you came up with a really good topic, I think, for tonight's discussion. In that a lot of people like the idea of being an artist, but
Right,
the
right.
actual practicality of being a professional artist and living your daily life as a professional artist is a totally different thing than most people think it is.
Yeah.
So why don't you go ahead and kick us off with that?
Yeah. Well, I had this epiphany a few weeks ago. I've been getting a lot of email lately from subscribers who say that they're aspiring concept artists, and maybe that doesn't sound surprising to a lot of people, but there's been a noticeable emphasis on that idea of concept art
Mhm.
specifically, not just because my site, I mean, it really it's like it had, people there are people who are character designers, story artists,
Right.
painters, lots of different kinds of artists. So there's been a noticeable, kind of increase of people talking about concept art specifically. And then I'll go to their sites or whatever and follow their links, and it's just kind of a spaghetti, kind of a mess, like just kind of a complete lack of structure. And it looks like a concept, but not in the, in the like
Yeah,
interesting, like, oh, this is the concept of a movie or a concept of a game.
yeah,
It's the concept of a painting, you know? It's
yeah,
like, and so I kind of was just like pacing around my house for a while, like trying to think through it and like, what is this? Like, what is the trend? And I don't know if I'm right or not, but I had this feeling. I just had this thing pop into my head where I went, I think that a lot of people nowadays are, not a lot of artists nowadays are in love with the idea of being a concept artist because they like the concept of being an artist.
right,
And that's sort of the same thing as you just said, which
yeah,
is that I feel like there's a lot of and I'm not, I don't want to get on a soapbox. I want to get on lots of soapboxes, but this is not a soapbox I'm actually that interested in getting on.
yeah,
But there is sort of a typical soapbox of like, oh, nobody has any attention span anymore and whatever. And
right,
I don't really know all that I think about that, but I do know that there's something to it. And there's something to like our instant gratification, and there's something to our obsession with celebrity, and not just celebrity, but the idea that you can become a celebrity by like singing into your webcam. And the sort of lack of, I feel like, hard work is sort of, it's kind of not what it used to be,
yeah,
or so it seems. And well, yeah, I mean that's basically the idea. It's like, do you really want to be an artist, or do you want me to like sprinkle pixie dust on you and you wake up tomorrow morning and you can paint like Noah Bradley?
right.
It's like, well, I mean, I want that.
It sadly
But
doesn't work like that.
yeah, exactly.
I
And
wish it did.
yeah, right. Uh, yeah. Anyway, that's the basic idea.
Yeah, I mean it's very true. I mean, I know a lot of people that I guess get this idea that they want to be an artist because they see all these artists and they love the stuff they're producing, and they see the life that they live, and they want that life. They want to be able to do that. But if you don't like love making art, even when you're
Right.
making like really bad art,
Right.
you're never going to get to that point when you're making really awesome art.
Right.
Because I mean, like both of us, we made a lot of terrible art. I'm just going to assume that you've made some terrible art in your time.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So and you have to go through a lot of that, and somehow you have to find a way to really enjoy making that terrible art.
Right.
Even the process. Back in the day when I was terrible, I liked drawing. It was fun to draw. It was fun to paint. I was always having a really good time. So. I think that's an important thing that a lot of people miss out on when they're thinking about how to become an artist.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh. Oh shoot! I just hit my mic. Am I still? Can you
Yeah,
still
you're
hear me?
good. You're
Okay,
good.
good. I'm trying not to like don't mess with the cable. Um. Uh. Oh shoot! Now I forgot what I was gonna say. You just said that oh yeah, terrible art.
Right.
I was I was on a long road trip for the last 4 months with my wife, and we just went everywhere basically. And we were in let's see, we were in Kentucky staying with my family for a while, and I hadn't been to my parents' house in a long time. They had always come up to see me in Columbus, or they'd come out to LA, and so I hadn't been to my parents' house in a while, and I was in there, and they have all my art from late high school and early college when I first started painting with actual paint, as opposed to just like drawing soldier guys
Right.
shooting aliens or whatever. And I was like, wow, this a lot of this art is better than the stuff I made like 3 years later. There was something about that. I don't know. There was something about the not knowing how to do it that
Hmm.
made me pay more attention and almost made me do a better job. And as I started to become, I mean, I guess there's sort of a bit of pride in that, but there was something that just really, I had this like spike of kind of being good, and then, well, good for a
Yeah.
17-year-old or whatever,
Right.
and then this like dip for a long time. It's just kind of not interesting stuff for a long, long time. And finally, I feel like I after I got my job at Disney, I kind of started making stuff that I feel like I actually have some pride in.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting how long there was sort of this, I don't know, this just huge. In that time in Denver when I was working at the Guitar Center, there were a few pieces in there that were pretty solid. But
Right.
there's just it's like ride the wave, ride the wave of that passion. If things are clicking together, it's like, oh man, do a lot of paintings
Yeah,
because
definitely.
your brain might take over at some point and
Yeah,
start.
I mean, I can relate to that because I mean, I have noticed waves where like I thought it was pretty good, and then for a while, I just was producing nothing I was happy with.
Right.
I'd look back on art for like months or whatnot, and I'd realize, wow, I've got like nothing good in all of that time. There's just nothing there. So it's kind of tough, but I guess you just kind of have to keep going and keep working at it.
I think you have to do. This is something I'm not. I've never articulated this thought before. So This is here we are. This is the first time I've ever said this. I've ever put words to this idea. But someone wrote me this morning, and she was talking about. Oh shoot, what was it? I'm trying to remember exactly what she said, but oh darn. You know what? If you say something interesting, I can probably find the email actually here. Oh no, I'm not gonna find it.
No,
Oh well.
hopeless. Oh well.
I thought maybe I might have archived it already, but yeah. Well, anyway, let's move on.
Moving on. So let's go ahead and like dive into what it does take to be an artist. So like if someone, for instance, is a student or they're really passionate about art and they want to become an artist, what kind of things does it take to get to actually being a professional artist? Do you have any ideas? Start us off with.
Well, I just remembered what I was gonna say, and that
Oh,
is,
here we
she
go.
wrote me, and this is actually off this question. She wrote me and asked me how she knows when a painting is done,
Uh-huh.
and she said, no one has ever told me what a finished painting looks like.
Right.
And I remember thinking, wow, that's a strange. What is that thought? Like what's really happening in her mind there, and what's giving her this understanding and everything. And I thought, well, first of all, that's kind of the artist's job,
Mhm.
right? I mean, I understand what she's getting at,
Yeah.
but I feel like you need to try to just decide. Like, try to just take that authority.
Mhm.
Take responsibility for knowing when the painting is done. And it's not like, anyway. So I was like, here's one tip, one thing you can do, and I think this gets to your question you just asked as well, and that is decide what you like and
Mhm.
why.
Yeah.
I don't. I bring up constantly when I'm doing critiques and things like that. In at conventions and that kind of thing. And I'll throw out some classical painting 101 names, and people's eyes just glaze over. Like,
Right.
they have no idea who I'm talking about. I'm like, well, you have to know, you have to have not only a mental image, but a visceral, emotional image of what is good and what has been good for hundreds and hundreds of years. What have we as a human race agreed is good and what agreed is finished? What is our definition of painting?
Right.
What is a painting? And look at how humans have agreed on that for the last whatever hundreds of years, and try to just pay attention. That's it. Like, you don't have to draw any conclusions. You don't have to like write a paper. Just spend time absorbing that and just pay attention. Look closely, and then when you get bored, keep looking. Because that's the stuff that is really good will speak to you. And we understand that on a kind of an immediate level, and we understand that on like a movie level or a game level. We see something and it's like, ooh, ah, and then we kind of move on. But it's like we don't really stop that often to really look, really pay attention to why am I having this visceral reaction to this work,
Yeah, that's part of the reason I tell people so often to try to actually go to museums Because I think
Oh, yeah.
people get addicted to looking at art online because you can go through so many images and see so much stuff so quickly. But at least personally, it kind of lends itself more to just browsing than really looking at something.
Right.
Whereas if you're in a museum, you're more inclined to like, okay, let me just sit down in front of this painting and like really analyze it, really study it, really find out why it, struck me so much. And there's nothing like walking into a room full of paintings and seeing one across the room that really catches your eye, and then figuring out what about that painting catches your eye. So I totally agree with you that kind of developing that taste for good and finished work is extremely important for artists. Although I guess a lot of people probably will come up with the thing. I suppose we should talk about style for a little bit,
Sure.
and whether to emulate styles or whether to look at artists or not look at artists. And I have my answer. I always repeat to this question when people ask, but I'd be interested to hear what you tell people.
Well, I mean, I have a big surprise. I have a long kind of rant about style. Um, but for one, what do you want to do? If you want to be a concept artist for hire that goes and works on movies, then you have to be able to deconstruct styles. So the holy grail of having your own distinctive style is not necessarily the thing you need to be focusing on right now.
Mhm.
That will happen. Just the better you get and the more you paint and the more, just like I was saying, the more you figure out what you like, the more that'll happen. And the more kind of crystallized your style or kind of your favorite go-to styles will start to emerge.
Right.
But if you want to do like if you want to be like Creature Box, and you want to have this very distinctive style that's
Mhm.
very commercial, and it's like they do their thing and it's so good, it's like that really works for them. Brett
Yeah.
Bean is another great example of that. Brett, except actually Brett is incredibly versatile, but he has a certain sensibility that he also sort of, when he does his own personal work, he kind of demonstrates. And anyway, so if you want to be an icon, or maybe if you have the capability to be an icon, then that's great. But that's a whole then your personal style is something maybe that's maybe a bigger part of the conversation.
Mm.
Does that make sense? I don't even know if I'm actually making sense.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
I mean, I totally see what you're saying because I mean, most of the time, when you're getting hired, you're either getting hired to come in and emulate the style that they want, or you're
Right.
being brought in because they love your style.
Right.
And
Exactly.
both of those are extremely important. It's probably much more common to get brought in to emulate a style than to be
Right.
brought in to, show off your own style. So as far as hireability goes, probably the former is a little bit better.
Right.
But yeah, style is, at least my own take on it, is something that I usually tell people not to really worry about.
Right.
I find that students get way too wrapped up in it. They think it's this huge, big concern, and they need to spend a lot of time thinking about it and trying to have a style. And I
Right.
usually just tell them that if you just focus on doing really good work, you're gonna have a style whether
Right.
you like it or not.
Yeah.
I never have tried to have a style. I've never put a minute of effort into having a particular style. But for whatever reason, when people look at my work, they can
Yeah.
usually tell that it's my stuff. There's just stuff that I do that just seems to happen naturally. I don't ever try to do it. It's just how I make art. I'm just trying to make the best art I can, and that's just how it ends up looking. Which is why I just recommend people to focus more on producing really good stuff than worrying too much about style. But you are right that you do need to learn that ability of breaking down a style, figuring out how to emulate it, if you ever hope to get a job, anyways.
Right. And I would argue that you are actually really incredibly versatile, and um, uh, because you're a painter,
Hmm.
you're a real painter. And I don't mean, even though real paint
Right.
as in paintbrush paint is important, that's not what I mean. I mean, you think like a painter, you paint like a painter. Your process is painterly.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people think like, or a lot of artists tend to try and think like a concept artist or try and think
Hmm.
like an illustrator. And it's like, well, but as close as we can get to the fundamentals, the more, uh, which I refer to, and people hear me who go to my site hear me talk about this all the time, which is mastery.
Hmm.
That's the more time and the more of a relationship we have with the fundamentals, the closer we are to mastery, I think, and of the craft. And because you're just such an adept painter, like giant, lizard, rock, glowing creature, what it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. The point is, it looks like a painting.
Hmm.
And anyway, I don't remember where I was going with that, Noah, but
I don't know either. But you
oh
were very
right,
complimentary, so I appreciate it.
it gives you, well, no, my point is that gives you, it gives you a versatility just by virtue of the fact that you understand painting,
Right.
because you're not like Dragon Guy or
Hmm.
something. It's like you could change, the giant rock creature into a, mountain, and here you have a naturalistic landscape.
Right.
So it's there's all this emphasis on subject matter and style and technique, when it's like, man, mastery, that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Painting and drawing, it's that simple, and it's not simple at
Right.
all, but
I mean, it takes forever to learn, but it's really all
right.
you do have to learn.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good point about that. Now let's we talked about style a little bit. Let's talk about art school. Now I went to art school, graduated from art school. You graduated from art school. You even went to grad school. So what's your take on art school?
um I have to be careful when I talk about this,
No,
because
you don't. I say terrible things about art
um
schools too.
well, here's the thing. Before I say anything, I want to say this, and that is that I know, I mean, art school, I have tons of very close friends who are art school faculty.
Hmm.
I get emails all the time from people who are art school faculty who are writing to thank me about what I'm doing, and they talk about their students and what they're trying to achieve and that kind of thing. You don't choose to be a teacher, you know, whatever, for any other reason than the fact that care about about seeing artists grow, about seeing
Right.
artists, so I believe that art, most artists that are teaching are, have have their heart in the right place. So
Right.
that should be made clear. So I don't mean to in any way villainize art teachers that work for,
Right.
art
Oh,
schools.
definitely. Art
Um,
teachers are by and large really good people, often really good
awesome.
artists.
Yeah.
Heart's
Yep.
in the right place.
The system, however, is really flawed. I think that costs are just insane. It's just insane. It is insane that, students at a certain particular, very, should I say, pervasive art school brand, um, are graduating with, $100,000 in debt,
Yeah.
and a really mediocre portfolio.
Right.
It absolutely is heartbreaking. And this was one of the main reasons I started Oatly Academy.
Hmm.
Was because I was like, man, this is a crime. It's a crime that just hundreds of thousands of students are going to schools and it's just, it's compared to what they can get through, you know, um, mentoring under, in a lot of the online options,
Right.
and going, if I were doing it today, and I'm actually really proud of CCAD. I think they're actually
Hmm.
doing a really good job by and large. I don't think there are a lot of art schools, brick and mortar art schools, that are kind of doing it right, but
Yeah.
um, there are a select few, that I think are still really great. They're
Hmm.
still incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
And so the question is, how badly do you really want to be in the building,
Right.
um, as a prospective student? But if I were doing it today, I would Frankenstein my own art
Hmm.
education and spend about just a minuscule fraction of of the debt I had to dig myself out of,
Oh, you bet.
after CCAD. I would take your mentorship.
Thank you.
I
I would
would.
take your course.
Thank you.
We'd be
Yeah.
set.
Um, And I would do let's see, what else would do Nathan Fowlks's course at Schoolism
Oh, absolutely.
for sure.
I really want to sign up for that. It looks
Yeah,
so
yeah,
cool.
he is a Jedi Master.
Yeah.
I would do Bill Perkins' class at CDA at the Concept Design Academy, and I would
Mhm.
fly out and I would crash on someone's couch in LA, in Pasadena or whatever, and go to that because it's only like 10 weeks long. So I'd find a way to make that work.
Yeah.
Um, and here's the other thing. You don't the biggest things I feel like that you get out of being in a brick and mortar art school, almost all of them you can get at a place like whatever, a place. Well, I mean, a place like Oatley Academy.
Right.
To be honest, I mean, it sounds like just a shameless plug, but it's not. I mean,
Sure.
this is exactly what this is what we're trying to build there. Is a place where you have an inspiring, laser focused, passionate community that will not like let you off the hook when you're just farting around. And that that's it's we're building that there. And fundamentals like absolute rock solid, tangible, actionable fundamentals, not just, hey, you should draw more,
Right.
or whatever. It's like, work on your figures. It's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And so literally actionable advice, that
Right.
you can really, really, that makes a difference,
Yeah.
and anyway, so I would, that's the thing. Most of it can be the main thing the main two things that are missing from an online art education are things that you can, even without an actual course, can go and contrive on your own. And that is life drawing in the space, going and not drawing from photos, literally going into the coffee shop or the mall or the zoo or whatever and drawing from life and plein air painting.
Yep.
And both of those things you can do on your own.
Yeah.
Now, granted, you don't have a teacher there right over your shoulder in that instance. So that's why it's not a bad idea if you have the ability to enroll in a local thing for that. That's what I recommend there. So that's what I would do. I would enroll locally for figure drawing and locally for plein air painting, and then everything else I would do online.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting thought because now you've got me thinking of how if I could go back and redo my art education, how I would do it. And I realized that probably what I would do is I would take a year or two and go to an atelier, like something like Watts
Yep.
Atelier or the Los Angeles Academy of whatever.
Oh man, yeah.
Go to one of those schools, get the absolute best drawing and painting traditional instruction I could possibly find. Do a year or two of that, get comfortable with that, and then I would probably go for a year at one of the really good, more concept art focused ateliers like Red Engine Studios, or if you're over in Asia, Fengju.
That's awesome.
Do a year at one of those, really focused in, and then after that, I would probably take a couple of years and just do all online stuff. I download every online video, watch every possible thing.
Yep.
And yeah, that's probably how I would go about my education at that point.
Yeah, me too, man.
And you would spend an eighth the cost of going to any art school. Like right now, if an art student were to walk up to me and ask if he should go to art school, unless someone has a large scholarship, I can't recommend it, because if they're going to end up with over $100,000 in debt,
oh yeah, it's insane.
There's no way I can recommend it, because I mean I know how much artists make in the industry, and some artists make pretty good livings. That's totally reasonable.
But they're a very small
they're a small portion, and even the really really good livings, it's still really hard to pay off that much debt. Because you get just in so much debt. I graduated with $40,000, which I thought was quite a bit, and I had to work my butt off to be able to pay that off.
I had to like 26. I think.
Yeah, I can't imagine the people with like 160,000.
Yeah, it's just crippling.
It is, and it just completely kills all your options. Because the thing about being an artist is that the first few years of your career are really scary. Because you're just trying to get your footing, you're trying to get your first jobs.
You're working at Guitar Center.
Exactly. Working random jobs. And if you just have this pressure of like, oh my God, student loan payments every month, and you have to make that much money, that can really kill you, because you can
Yeah.
quickly bail on your career. Okay, I'm just screwed. I'm going to go get a regular job. I'm going to try to pay this off. I can do art in 10 years or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just really, really bad right now. I cannot understand how so many students are still going to art school for that much money and somehow expecting to pay off all that debt. It's just
Yeah.
it's a real crime.
Their parents pressure them. A lot of people who write me, it's like their
Right.
parents are pressuring them, like, you've got to go to a real university,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh my God. I've got a work in progress blog. Who knows when I'm going to,
Yeah.
get it posted, but it's called Degrees Don't Matter,
Right.
and the thing I always say is degrees don't matter, but opportunities do.
It's true.
So if you go to Art Center, there are a ton of industry opportunities. There's a lot of prestige with that degree and everything. And that's like that's what Art Center gives you. Art Center gives
Right.
you the opportunity, the actual degree you finishing, doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter at all. The work matters and opportunities can help, but the most important thing is the fundamentals that you are a great painter. The end. It's that, I'm really ranting now. Sorry. But it's just so there's just like you said, it's just such a crime. It's such a crime that so many students are kind of forced into this scenario where it's like, oh my God, you're just digging deeper and deeper and deeper into debt. And for what, so you can come out like, financially paralyzed, starting out, it's like, oh.
Yeah, my art degree has never gotten me anything. No one has ever asked to see it. No one has ever cared. I think I've taken it off my resume at this point. I don't even tell people that I went to art school because it doesn't matter. Nobody cares about that.
Yeah,
So,
they see one of your paintings and they just have that wow moment, and it's like, oh, done.
That's what I get hired for. I get hired
done.
because I went to an art school. So, yeah, I think that's a good summation of our feelings on art school. I do love, again, we both love the artists that teach at these art schools. I had a lot of wonderful teachers in my time during art school, and they helped me so much. They taught me a ton of things. But looking back, do I feel completely satisfied with my art school experience? Not at all. There were a lot of things that they did not teach me. The whole business side of things. There's a reason I put together my whole art of freelancing thing. Is just because I wasn't taught most of that. A couple things I was taught by one of my teachers in the last few semesters. But beyond that, nobody was teaching any of that business stuff. My business class that I took in art school was a joke.
Mine too.
We learned how to pay bills in Quicken for one class. I do not even kidding. That was an entire class period about how to pay bills in Quicken.
Yeah, we had a business class. We had one business class. And it was like, I think like half a semester or something. It was, whatever, 8 weeks. And we had to write a fake business plan for like a soda. And we're going to pitch a new pop. It's like, what does this have to do with anything? And then I get out of school and I'm like, oh, okay, so who do I send my mailers to? How do I, how do I start a conversation?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, do you know how valuable that would have been to just somebody had just taught me how to start a conversation so I didn't have to go be, an idiot all the time and learn the hard way. Fortunately, it kind of worked out, but
yeah,
man,
it's sad. So that's probably enough for answering about.
Actually, I think we should I think we should probably say that. What would be your advice to somebody who is, say, halfway through right now? And they're.
If it's a question of $100,000 more in debt or 80,000 more in debt.
Yeah.
I'd seriously look at what you're getting out of it. And if you can see that if you stay there for 2 more years, you're going to be a super successful professional, then by all means stay there. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're going to land a really good job straight out of art school, cool, go for it. But if you're looking at it and you're seeing that you're not going to be quite professional, I'd personally try to stay away from it.
Yeah.
You know, that much money is really scary. When you get out into the real world and have to start making those student loan payments,
Yep.
they're really tricky because, I mean,
They don't stop.
and for like 160,000, which is pretty average if you go to a 4-year art school, you know, with paying all the tuition, that's 1,600 a month, every single month for like I think that's 10 years. That's a 10-year loan, and it's brutal trying to pay a $1,600 bill every month on top of all your other bills. I mean, I hate to break it to you. I mean, you might be a great artist, but you know, having that
It's
much
just
disposable
so
income
much
when you
money.
first start working is going to be really tricky.
So much money. It's so much money. It's
Yeah,
just crazy.
yeah,
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, I would say, it doesn't hurt to put it on hold. A lot of
yeah,
situation. I don't know. I would definitely advise knowing for sure, but sometimes you have a bit of a grace
yep,
period, where you can kind of, you can put school on hold for a minute and just feel out the sort of like hodgepodge Frankenstein education. You can
yeah,
try that and then, start back at school if you have to, and then it'll
hmm,
kick back in. You're kind of not having to pay payments will kick back in and you can kind of just pick up where you left off.
right,
So that's, probably most likely an option for a lot of people. But if you've just started or if if you feel like it's at all negotiable, the actual being in the brick and mortar school, man, I highly recommend it. I would I do feel like that's the thing, just to underscore one more time. And the thing that I got, and I'm really actually really satisfied with my education at CCAD. And I think the reason being is that the thing that it taught me, and it took a long time for this to get through my head, but I had a gut level like appreciation of drawing and painting.
hmm,
And I had that was one of the most important things I learned in all of art school, and that is that when in doubt, draw.
right,
When in doubt, draw.
yeah,
And it's like that. And especially now, I feel like because there's so much like entrepreneurship and everything and personal brand stuff in the air, and that stuff's,
right,
I love that stuff. I love
oh, yeah,
talking about, but it's so easy to focus on that being the, I mean, I can't tell you, how many emails I get, people asking me how to get more followers.
right,
It's like, well, go paint like Noah.
yeah, or just
Seriously,
be
really.
really
I mean,
spammy. Yeah. I mean, it's true. You know, if you don't have the art skills to back it up, none of this marketing stuff will work.
right.
You know, I love the marketing side of it. I just find it fascinating.
Oh yeah, it's
But you know,
fun.
if I didn't at least have pretty good paintings, nobody would care about me.
Right.
And I realize that. So I mean, really, the first priority is working on your art and making sure it's really good, it's really professional, and it's where you want it to be.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. So let's see here. So let's talk a little bit about what it's like to be a professional artist. Because, I mean, we've both gotten to the point where we're working professionals. We've both been in the industry for, how long actually have you been in the industry? Like all told.
Well, my very well. I mean, yeah. I mean, it depends on where I consider the beginning. It's like I
Mhm.
was freelancing, like I said, right out of school, but it was so few jobs. I know I didn't feel like a professional
Right.
artist at that point. I guess really the first. I mean, in a way, it's like if I count that as feeling like a professional artist, and it's been
Uh,
since I was 16 years old, and I did my first like T-shirt
right.
design,
Yeah.
or whatever. But as far as like really good clients, like
Hmm.
really, like kind of not all of them were necessarily what somebody would consider high profile, but solid clients that pay well and that I have a professional kind of ongoing relationship with would have been about 2004 or 5.
Okay.
So
So you've
however
been,
long
that's
ago
like
that
eight
was.
years. Yeah, you've been in the industry for a while. Um,
Yeah, something like that.
Heh. So now that we're kind of both in the industry, semi-comfortable in the industry, let's talk a little bit about those skills that it takes to kind of keep us where we are today, the stuff we
Ah,
do day to day. Because you know we've banged out the general idea of how to like get fundamental skills, and both of us
mm.
sort of have at least a general grasp on that. So how do we continue to kind of push our work and keep getting jobs and stay stable in this crazy field that we're in.
Yeah. Well, for me, I know it was, I didn't, I mean, after my very first layoff at Disney
Mhm.
back in like 2007, I think it was. Yeah, I think. Oh, no, 2006. Um, no, 2007. I I haven't had a day without work since then.
Yeah.
And I think part of it, well, I don't really know. Yeah, I know, and it's like, the longer I do this, the more I realize I don't know very much at all. But I do think that this had something to do with it, and that was a realization early on that my job as a visual development artist is not that's not my primary job. My primary job is to make my art director's life as easy as possible.
Yep. Totally true.
And I think there was something in that realization that has resulted in me not really. I mean, I haven't had a day without. I mean, until I quit Disney in August deliberately to start the online art school, I haven't had a day without work since 2006.
Wow. Yeah.
So
That's really good.
it's
And
amazing.
that's a really important realization to come to, because I think a lot of artists have this idea that since they're artists, they kind of get to do whatever the hell they want to do. When
Yeah,
in fact, really, our jobs as professional artists is to make our clients happy.
yeah,
I often get asked, like, what do you do when an art director requests a revision and you don't agree with it? I do the stupid revision.
yeah,
It doesn't matter. I'm not producing these paintings to make me happy. I'm doing these because it's a job and they hired me. Of course you're allowed to kind of like push back a little bit or suggest other ideas, but at the end of the day, they're giving you a paycheck because they want you to do what they're telling you to do.
yeah,
So it really is a job, and establishing those working relationships is also really important. Getting to connect with the art directors, I find is very important. Um, Establishing both a very professional relationship, of course, but also getting them to really like you.
yeah.
Being a likable guy is it's much easier to get work if you are than if you're just the jerk who it has pretty good art. So I guess you'll get some work.
Yeah, or just someone who just doesn't engage. That's the
Right.
other thing. Is that like I spend a ton of time with my own students, and I spend a lot of time with art students at brick and mortar art schools because I just love doing school visits.
Mhm.
Um, and something I encounter often in art schools when I'm doing portfolio reviews, especially, and I'm sort of there. There's a room full of students, but I'm kind of talking to one of them at a time. Um, is just a lack of engagement,
Mhm.
and it was cool. I was at SCAD
Mhm.
uh, a couple months ago to
I
do a
actually
talk there.
think you were there like a week after I was, by the way.
Oh, that's right. I forgot
Yeah.
about that. Yeah, because they were like they had said that you were just there, and I was
Yeah.
all like, disappointed that we couldn't
Yeah.
jam. But yeah, so yeah, I was there, and I was just like, wow, the students there were so engaged. They were
Mhm.
really, I don't know, and it's like, yeah, saying thank you or, oh, that's interesting, that it's good, but just engaging as if we're professionals
Mhm.
is super important, to just come in there and be like, it's not cockiness, it's just confidence, and there's a difference,
Right.
and just being able to, and I think part of it is kind of the knowledge that we're all geeks and
Yeah.
we all love to like geek out about art, and we
Right.
love art, and and so you can let your geek flag fly in that sense.
Yeah.
That can be taken very quickly to a kind of to an unhealthy place, but it's like, the, just send, you can email your art directors awesome stuff.
Yeah.
If you see some great tutorial or some great painting that just blew you away, or, I mean, just send it to them. I mean, hey,
Yeah.
because they're an artist too,
Yeah.
So anyway, that kind of thing. It's like, what would you do with your super passionate art friends? And maybe that's
Mhm.
the problem. Maybe you don't have any super passionate art friends
Yeah.
but there's no excuse for that now, because
Yeah.
there's an
There's the
infinite number of
internet.
ways to, yeah, there's an infinite number of ways to find them.
All right.
You can find him in Oatley Academy, actually.
Yeah, there you go.
But anyway, the point is that they, what, how do you relate with your super passionate art friends, and
Mhm.
that's how the most passionate of your art friends that are also, not so awkward that they kind of destroy relationships, um, are the people that are going to be, you know, making it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we get to work with some really cool people. That's one thing I really love about working in this industry because
Oh yeah.
I wanted to go into graphic design before I ever went into the illustration and concept art
Wait,
route.
really?
Yeah,
Look
I
at
was
that.
set on being a graphic designer. I was set on being a computer programmer before then. But then I switched to graphic design, and I was actually probably a pretty good graphic designer. I was better than I was a painter at the time. Much
Wow.
better, much better. But I did a couple of freelance gigs back in the day, and I hated it because the
Uh,
clients you work with are just terrible because
oh,
they don't know what they want and they have no interest in what you're doing. They just want you know
right.
some product that they don't even really understand what they want.
Hmm.
Whereas when I got into this industry, I realized I get to work with people that are basically just like my friends.
Yeah.
They're all these really nerdy people. They love what they're doing
Yeah.
because they're just dealing with art and games and movies and stuff all
Yeah.
day long, and they all really love it. So
Hmm.
that's something I've really loved about this. Coming from that graphic design route, it makes me realize just how good we have it. That we get to work with some really cool people.
It's awesome. Yeah. I love it, man.
One thing about communication skills that I thought I'd touch on is just how important they are.
Yeah.
I think I might have mentioned it on my last talk or something like that. And that I get a ton of emails. I'm sure you do too. Of people asking for advice, and the reply I really want to send to most of them is just to learn how to write an email.
Oh my Lord. This is my number one pet peeve. My number one pet
It's
peeve.
insane. These
No
people,
capitalization,
no,
no punctuation, just a huge block of text,
yeah,
or no, almost nothing at all. Hey, Chris, check out my site.
right,
Link. And it's like, oh my
yeah.
God.
I think if people would just like take a quick lesson on how to write an email, I mean,
Yeah.
I would actually respond to these people because
Yep. Oh yeah.
I don't have time to respond to a lot of the emails I get,
Oh
and
yeah.
I wish I did,
Yeah.
but I really don't. And when somebody just sends me an email and it clearly looks like they spent 10 seconds maybe
Yep.
writing this email, I'm not that inclined to respond to them and
Yeah.
spend 20 minutes of my time looking and critiquing their work.
Yeah.
Because most of the time that I've done that in the past, you don't even get a response from them.
Yep. That's
Um,
completely true.
so I think it's something that needs to kind of be beaten into people that communication is so
Yeah.
important, and being able to clearly communicate your ideas and your thoughts is so important.
Yeah, read it. You got to read. Just, read stuff. Like read fiction, read nonfiction. Like you got
Yeah,
to exercise your brain, and it's like and you got to discipline yourself to stop and just write a flippin' professional email. This is something I told the SCAD students actually when I was there.
hmm
I said, this was on my mind at the time. And I said, there are all these statistics that you hear about the number of students graduating, each year, blah, 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 and how intimidating those numbers are. And I'm like, you don't have to worry about that at all because this is the majority of the kinds of emails that I receive.
yeah,
Here's your statistics right here. Yes, all these thousands of students or whatever. And it's like, and they're writing these terrible, I mean, it's like, I would not hire you. You could not.
no,
I can't tell you how uninterested I am in hiring you for something.
yeah,
You have completely burned the bridge before you even tried to build it.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean,
sorry.
I don't even
Ranting again.
bother looking at their art once I see the email. I mean, I don't even have to read the email. If I just see that they haven't
Yep.
put a single punctuation mark in the entire email, you know, odds are
Oh
their
yeah.
art's probably going to reflect that. I hate to break
Yep.
it to you. And even if they are amazing, how do you talk to someone like that?
How would you have a relationship exactly, especially if you don't live in the same city? How in the world are you supposed to have a relation? I mean, what are they gonna do? How are
Yeah,
they gonna like? How are they gonna take advantage of you or disrespect you? You just have no idea. It's
yeah,
like if you have the choice of who to, subcontract to or whatever, it's like you're not gonna go with that guy.
yeah. So So learn how to write an email, please.
Oh
And
Lord.
if you write me a really nice email, I will respond to it. I do respond to the really nice ones. It's the people that look like they put no effort into it that inspires me not to put any effort back.
That's
So
amazing.
just try to keep that in mind, and it'll pay off seriously for professional work. Learning to write professional emails to your art directors and stuff is so important.
Oh
If
yeah.
you come, because like most of the clients I work with, I don't know about you, but I've never met most of them. I've never
Mhm.
talked to them. I've never seen them. Pretty much all of the communication is over email. And so their one impression of how professional I am,
Right.
besides my work, is how I write my emails.
Yeah.
The communication that I do in those emails is their only impression that I'm like a
Yeah.
responsible, good person. So put as much as you can into that. And if English isn't your first language or whatever, have a friend read over it before you send it out.
Yeah.
It's not that bad of an idea. Make sure the spelling's right, make sure the grammar's right, make sure their name is right. I have misspelled an art director's name, and it's really bad.
Yeah. I
That
think I
was
did that
very
too.
embarrassing.
Yeah.
Especially like on the first email when they're like giving you a
Hmm.
job, and you're like, "Oh, thanks." Wrong
Yeah.
name.
Yeah.
Uh, it's like, wow, that's
Oh
kick,
my God.
oh, great way to kick off a good relationship with them.
Oh.
Um, but yeah, but yeah, don't make those kind of mistakes.
Oh, that's great.
So, all right, another rant done. So let's talk a little bit about burnout. It's something a lot of
Mm.
people tend to ask about, and people are really worried about burning out or not
Mm.
feeling inspired, or they don't, they have days where they just don't feel like working, and kind of what do they do then? I'd be interested to hear your rant on this subject.
Yeah. Well, this is another. I did say we were going to talk about hot topics. I didn't realize
We
we were talking
did.
about every one of them. No, no, I love it. Yeah, burnout's weird for me because I've never burnt out before. And I mean, I like my problem is working too much. I have to constantly discipline myself to stop and take a day off, and go on a, whatever trip. And I have to intentionally stop. Part of it is because I love what I do so much, and I
Mhm.
love my students, and I love just hanging out with them. I love responding to people's email. It's like I mean, I literally can have just like lose, the 3/4 of the day, just like writing people back.
Right.
And so I have to be super careful about that. I do get tired, but that's different. It's not a lack of enthusiasm. It's not a lack of inspiration. I'm just like tired. And then
Mhm.
I stop, when I start to get just exhausted, and I stop and I go to sleep, or I, go to a movie, or, I don't know, just go to the, hang out with my friends. And, so I don't really deal with that. I can't quite empathize with it. However, I do know that it's a real thing because
Mhm.
so many people deal with it. So I don't mean to invalidate it. I just don't understand it as much.
Yeah.
However, I think that a lot of times, and actually my friend Laura Innes and I did an episode of the Paper Wings podcast, about this, and I did an art cast as well called Avoiding Artistic Burnout.
Mhm.
And that episode, I think there's a lot of good stuff in that episode. It's not as strong as the one that Laura and I did, which is called The 5 Lies of Creative Block.
Mhm.
And if you Google either of those titles, you can find them. And anyway, the point is that I think that oftentimes, at least through the conversations that I've had with artists about this, it's something else. It's that you're focusing on the surface. So as a concept artist or an illustrator, you're focusing on they're looking in the wrong place. And that's the thing. And so I got an email yesterday from a guy who was like, I struggle with color, and he went on to talk about why color is so hard for him. And then he sent me his work, and it's like, oh, the drawing is like, I was like, just don't worry about color.
Yeah.
Just don't even need to worry about that right now, because the drawing is really needs work. And I was really, really, I was kind of intense about it, but in a, constructive way. I was
Mhm.
like, dude, just don't. So I think a lot of times it's that you're trying to fix the wrong problem.
Mhm.
Um, And just to so nobody gets like lost or frustrated about that, most likely it's drawing.
Yeah.
Like the odds are probably
Yeah.
if it feels like a ghost hunt, it's probably drawing.
Yeah.
So that's one, and then the other is that a lot of times there's just other personal stuff going on.
Yeah.
And I think that this is really hard. It's hard to I think it's probably hard for anybody to perform at their job if they have like a really hard personal thing going on.
Mhm.
But I think in a way, for a lot of artists, probably it's more difficult because we tap into that emotional well
Mhm.
oftentimes in order to work, even on client work.
Yeah.
And in fact, now that I think of it, that's what makes a lot of creative people unfulfilled at their jobs, is because they're not able to tap into any creative well because the job won't allow it.
Right.
Um,
No,
but
actually,
anyway,
that's actually interesting because I've realized, oddly enough, that the times when I do the best work is when I'm in the worst mood. When I am like ticked off at the world and I hate everyone, I do the absolute best work I do. For
wow.
whatever reason, a good mood doesn't necessarily make me do good art. Sometimes it's actually really bad moods that make me do good art. Um,
I think that's happened to me too, actually, before. I wouldn't say that I've been able to spot that as a consistent thing, but I
yeah,
do think there have been times where I've been like, all right, you just got to use this,
yeah,
kind of like an actor.
right,
You've just got to, whatever's going on, you just have to find a way to sort of use that. And if it's a lament, then, the art is going to look different, but at least it can still be good,
yeah,
you know?
exactly. But I
It's
mean,
about kind of like being honest, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's kind of what's,
yeah, it's definitely about that. I mean, I've never actually personally experienced much burnout. Yeah, I think something about being a professional artist is you get used to just doing the work. Whether you feel like it or not, that day
right.
you have to
That's the other
produce.
thing.
You have to produce paintings. Your art director does not care if you're having a bad day. Your art director doesn't care if you're not feeling like it. Your art director doesn't care if you're inspired or not. Your art director just wants the painting. So you kind of do get into
Well, they
this
might
habit.
care,
I
but
mean, they might. They might if they're a really nice art
you
director.
still have to do it though.
They're still like, okay, that's. I feel sorry for you, but where's my
Right.
painting at?
Yeah, exactly.
So
I'm at work, aren't I?
yeah, so like you sort of get this habit of just being able to produce work.
Right.
I mean, that said, I do get close to being burnt out from time to time. I've had it happen probably 2 or 3 times so far. And every time, it's always because I'm doing way too much commission work and not nearly enough work that I care about.
That's
Um,
interesting.
that has always been the pattern for me. Anytime I'm just diving into just tons and tons of commissions and not taking any time off to the side to do my own stuff, I get really burnt out because all of a sudden art is turning less about the stuff that I love doing and making all these crazy ideas actually into reality, and it turns into basically just a job. Um,
Yeah.
so for me at least, that's been my solution for avoiding burnout. Is just to do more personal work and take more breaks too. I mean, I'm actually not like you at all. I'm not the guy who like has to work all the time. I'm more the guy who I'm okay with working, but I'm really fine with taking breaks too.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's good.
I'm pretty sure in art school I took more breaks during painting classes than anyone else in there. Um, and it always worked for me because like the
Yeah.
times when I was working, I was into it. I was thinking about nothing else, and then I
Right.
just okay, now I need a break. Completely remove myself from it. Um,
Yeah. There have been a couple times just in the last week, twice in the last week, where I was stuck on. I'm developing this digital painting workshop
mhm.
that's hopefully will be available Tuesday if I can get it done by then or get it
Nice.
ready by then. And it's I got stuck twice, and both times I just stopped. And one day I went up to Santa Barbara to visit my friends Brian and Laura, and we went to a rescue farm and petted donkeys and goats, and it was awesome. And then the other time I just went and just hung out and just watched Mad Men with my wife,
Yeah.
and it was like I went to bed, and the next morning I woke up and I had the answer in my head already,
Yeah.
both days.
Yep.
It was just like, wow. my subconscious was like, if you would just get out of the way, I could fix this for you.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that's often the case. Like I usually come up with most of my best ideas for art or marketing or anything like that just when I'm on a hike usually. So I'll be on the side of a mountain completely alone, and that's when I'll just, oh, that's a good idea.
It's awesome.
So sometimes getting away from your work can be a really good thing for your work. So we're about a little over an hour in now. Do you want to open it up to
Yeah.
questions now? Get people asking whatever. Um, pretty much any topic. I mean, unless you have requests.
Yeah, no, whatever.
All right, cool. So bring on the questions. Worst freelance experience.
Huh. I'm not sure if I haven't really had. I don't know if I have one. I mean,
No?
I probably have had some that weren't. Well, there was a time I was working on something for Hasbro that still never ended up being announced, and so I don't
Right.
know. I don't think I'm allowed to even ever talk about it.
Right. I've got one of those too. They're fun.
Yeah, but I was doing this, and I worked all weekend long, and from the Sunday to the Monday morning, I didn't go to sleep, and I woke up on my Cintiq, and that
Jeez.
was pretty bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a John Henry thing, like
Yeah. I mean, I have had some pretty bad clients. Yeah, I've had like a couple really bad clients, but that's about it. And they just were not ideal to work with. There was a lot of miscommunication, not fun to work for. Yeah, but I mean,
Oh yeah.
I've been lucky. Like every one of my clients has paid me, for instance. I've never been like stiffed on a payment ever. So I've kind of lucked out in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had pretty good experiences. There was a time where it was hard to get paid
Yeah.
from a record label. I had to really, and it was one of those things where it was like the music industry was tanking,
Right.
and so it's like they were like their entire payroll was only getting paid like every 3 months or something.
Right.
And so it was one of those things where it was like, dude, we would send you the money, but we have no money, and
Right.
so it was like, in a way, it wasn't the client. I mean, it
Yeah.
technically really wasn't them being jerks. It
Yeah.
was just the whole industry was like going down.
Here's a question from Carson. He's about to pay off 30 grand in loans, doesn't really have a portfolio, and wants to get a temporary job to get rid of the loans. What's your thought on that? And also, just out of curiosity, what is your thought on getting like side jobs that aren't art related as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't actually know what my opinion is on that.
No?
I think it was maybe Bobby Chu that was saying in one of his like videos or something where he was like, I would rather. This is him speaking. I'm just paraphrasing, but I don't even know if it was him, but I think it was, where he was saying like, I would rather do a non-art job. If I've got to do a crappy job, I would rather do a non-art job that doesn't really matter, that I'm not emotionally invested in, that I can just think about my painting all the
Right.
time, than do crappy art jobs just because it's an art job.
Yeah.
And I guess probably that's what I probably agree with that.
Yeah, I remember actually hearing the same talk by him. Now that you mention it, and I am inclined to agree, because a miserable art-related job is not going to be fun. It really is just going to be work, and it's going to take something you love and turn it into this terrible thing you just dread. So there is something to be said for getting a side job.
There actually, I'd like to say something just kind of the same thing, which is that, well, it's kind of two things. One, just because you got paid for a job doesn't mean it should go in your portfolio automatically.
Very true.
And two, any art job is not necessarily getting you toward your goal. Just to be paid for art is not. It's easy to put too much emphasis on whether or not you're getting paid for something creative, and it doesn't necessarily matter. It doesn't. Well, I should say just because it's a financial thing doesn't automatically like validate it as it
Right.
doesn't validate you necessarily. It might, but it doesn't necessarily.
Yeah.
Don't just assume that it does because there's money involved.
Yeah. I mean, I get offered jobs that I turn down just because they're not at all where I want to take my art.
Right.
I get these random jobs that have nothing to do with what I want to do, nor where I want to go with my work.
Right.
And even though I'm sure I can make pretty good money doing them, it's not going to move me in any forward direction.
Right.
So there's not much point in making money off something like that.
Right.
Um, the best use of social media. This would be a good one for us to talk about
Mm.
because we're both fairly prolific in that regard. I'd be interested to hear you talk about some of your thoughts on that.
Right. Well, I mean, in a way, at the risk of sounding negative, I think it's kind of, in a way, kind of easier to talking about the worst uses of social media.
That's fairly true.
Which is, I had I don't know, it was a couple years back. I had a uh, friend that I really kind of believed in professionally, and I took a no, I mean, it wasn't a risk at all, but I worked really hard to promote this friend to a couple of my producers. And, movie producers don't have a lot of time,
Mhm.
and these producers that I'm referring to are my friends. I mean, I consider them
Right.
really my friends, but still, it's like I don't want to use up their mental bandwidth on something that what ended up being a waste of their time. And it
Mhm.
was like I was like, oh, check out this artist's site, and then they went, and the artist had the Twitter widget on their site in the sidebar, and they were talking all about how they were going to get wasted this weekend at
Nice.
in what I don't know who got it, Vegas or something,
Right.
and that's like the same time I'm like, hey, this person is awesome. I've worked with them. They're super talented. And
Right.
I'm like using my like card,
Uh-huh.
my friend, I'm playing the friend card, and it and that's what happened.
Yeah.
So it's, well, I mean, I guess probably that little parable does the trick, right?
Yeah, it says a lot. I mean, when I guess an important thing to realize is that when you do start using social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever, or even your blog, all of a sudden you become a public person, and you have to realize that everything you put online is your professional face, whatever you want that to be.
Yeah.
So, like every time you post a tweet, you have to realize your art directors might read that.
Hmm.
I know I have a few art directors that follow me on there, and so if I'm posting just stuff they would hate, it's not going to really look good for me. Um, so, a lot of people struggle with that because they're used to using all these things as their personal tools, and just as hang out with their friends and stuff. But you have to realize, like, all of a sudden, when you start using this stuff for professional stuff, you have to realize that everything you put on there is professional. Um, so, yeah,
Yeah,
I guess.
exactly.
Um,
Well, and social media, or at least as artists, professional artists tend to use it, I think, is a way to drive traffic to your site or
mhm,
build relationship with your followers or both.
right.
And it's like in either case, it's got to be worth people's time.
Yeah,
It's I go, how do I get more followers? It was like, well, stop tweeting about sandwiches,
it's true.
or whatever. And now I don't get me wrong. I think it's funny. There's a way to kind of just like say funny thing, be kind of personal. I'm not saying don't be
Right.
personable. Like definitely do that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it depends. But I mean, I talk about personal things, and
Sure.
it's not that. It's just it. I still curate it though, and I
Yeah.
try and be careful. I mean, I'm God, I made some huge mistakes.
Oh yeah.
But that's part of the risk of kind of being a pioneer in the world of social media, which we all are.
Mhm.
As if you're a professional artist and you're trying to figure out how to use it in your business, then congratulations, you're a pioneer. So
Yeah.
it's like we're gonna make mistakes.
Yeah.
That's part of this kind of rapidly changing digital world, But so don't beat yourself up if you do. It happens to all of us, but man, I think we could benefit from some more curation,
Yeah.
some more trimming of what of the volume of stuff that's posted and focusing on making it really count.
Yeah, I think that's a good lesson.
What do people want? Be a crowd
Yeah.
pleaser. It's like that's the thing. What and this is the other thing. This is why the obsession with followers is insane to me, because I'm like, well, you're so obsessed with getting more followers and you're not paying any attention to the 10 people that are following you.
Right.
It's like build relationship with them. They need to be rewarded for giving you a chance.
Yeah.
And until you're doing that, then there's no point. Like, what? So what are they gonna go do? Hey, come over, check out this person that takes advantage of us.
Right.
Come and check out this person who just wants me to follow them so they can have another number on their Twitter page. What?
Right.
It's like, ugh.
Yeah.
I don't want to. I
Yeah.
want to connect with artists.
Yeah. Yep. Totally true. Jumping to the finance side of things, do you actually use an accountant for your freelancing now?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I have for a long time. That was one of the best. I think it's a non-negotiable. I mean, I think you absolutely have to. And knowing what you can save with with a good CPA, it's uncanny. And we used our H&R Block here for a while in Glendale, and they were great. They were so great, So it's like I feel like sometimes that company gets I don't know. I mean, I feel like some people react weirdly to it, and I'm like, so they're on commission, I guess. So that's what I've heard. So that's, I guess, somehow a red flag. But with the guy we had, he's a manager now, and so he can't, he doesn't have time to do individual returns anymore. But so that just broke our heart. But he did it for several years, and he's amazing, just amazing, super good. So anyway, yeah, I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I'm still on the doing them all myself because I don't know, I get a kick out of it, I guess. The nerd in me still kind of enjoys it.
Well, if you can, I mean, it's a difference in like if you actually have a capability. But
right.
The thing is, though, is like if you have somebody who's local that really knows the state law, it's not illegal. They know the different ways to get you that extra $100 of write-off or the extra $1,000 of write-off or whatever that you never would have thought of on your own.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it's definitely a good idea, and I'd say once you're making a decent amount of money, I would say to go for it and get one, because it does pay off. I rarely hear someone has an accountant and it's like, oh my god, they're way overpriced. They don't save me any money. I've never heard someone say that. So I suspect in the next year or two, I'll probably move in that direction, because it does start to make sense.
Yeah, we had to get a new guy this year, and he was awesome, but time will tell, as to how that goes.
Yeah. What would you say to a recent graduate looking for a job?
Everything that we've already said on this podcast so far. Yeah.
That sounds about right. I guess mainly just keep trying. A lot of it is persistence. You're not going to get work right when you start trying to get work. I know when I first started getting work, it was months after I started sending emails and postcards and whatnot that I actually got gigs. So, and I know with you were doing little freelance stuff here and there for a long time before you ever got, something really serious. So, keep trying. Let's see here. What are your views on internships? This is something I have no experience with, so you're probably much better to answer this.
Well, I mean, I can only talk about animation studio internships. I don't know anything about anywhere else, but for example, the reputable ones like Nickelodeon's is apparently, by all accounts, amazing. And to me, it's like, well, a lot of them I don't know about Nickelodeon, but I know a lot of internships you don't get paid for. But it's like, well, but it's a lot of them are better than art school, and you pay for art school. So not getting paid to get an art, a like nuts and bolts, real world, art education for 6 months or 6 weeks or whatever, it to me is a no brainer if you're especially if you're starting out. So the reputable programs like the Disney Talent Development Program and the Nickelodeon program I know are awesome, and you can't. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. It's like the work of those artists is awesome. I think I had a friend that worked at Nickelodeon that I'm pretty sure that they're very, and again, if anybody out there works at Nickelodeon, you can feel free to correct me, but it's my understanding that the internship is where a huge number of the people that work in the studio actually started. So there's a lot of, it's kind of like Pixar in that way, in that it like you hardly ever meet any ex Pixar employees
Right.
because they don't leave.
Yeah.
And it's a similar thing with Nickelodeon that, like, man, once you kind of go in and you sort of click, um, it's just a place you don't want to leave and you want to just keep working there and that kind of thing. So it's I mean, to me, I'm like, man, if it gets me in the door, um, it's not like you're like a seasoned pro who all of a sudden they're going to like take a all of a sudden go work for free
Yeah.
at this place. It's like it's a chance to prove yourself.
Right.
And I think that's I mean, jump on it if you have an opportunity. Just check out the studio first.
Yeah.
Try and
Yeah.
do some googling.
Yeah, I know there was that. There was a studio, I think, down in Florida or something recently. I think an animation studio that was going to start using all of the interns for like basically unpaid employees, and just yeah,
Right.
it was a pretty nasty situation down there. So avoid stuff like that. But I do agree with you that internships look really good. I don't have any experience with them, but I guess I wish I had gotten one or two back in the day. I think they would have really helped.
Yeah.
Here's a good question.
If you can get any,
Oh no, go for it.
if you can get any special time, any type of special FaceTime with anybody in the industry, that's a value. I mean, it's probably going to be, there's probably going to be some value in it,
Mhm.
and it's likely to be a lot of value in it.
Yeah, definitely. So people are curious, what was it like working at Disney, being in-house there? I mean, what was your average day like? How much work were you expected to produce on a daily basis? That kind of stuff.
It's like how probably most people would imagine it. Um, Tons of creative people everywhere you turn. People really at Disney really still love Walt, and still there's all this kind of stuff. We're always quoting Walt and that kind of thing, and it's like that's really in the kind of conversations and kind of in the air there, which is awesome. Um, and I mean, at least at Disney Toons where I worked, I mean, I had a very, there were times where it'd be like, hey, we're gonna, I'd work late some night or something to, if there's like a John Lasseter meeting coming up or something where we've got to show work to John, that would work extra hard then or whatever. But for the most part, I'd go home at 6 and, I mean, I just worked normal hours and, painted all day. I get to paint characters all day.
Yeah,
it's
awesome.
pretty cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's fun.
yeah, we do get to work some cool jobs.
Yeah, I mean, some of my best friends are my friend. Developed while I was there. It's like it's part of my life and always will be.
Yeah. Here's a question from Colin. I know painting and drawing fundamentals are important to get better, but I'm just not sure what I should be painting and drawing. There's so much out there, and I don't know where to start with it. And I would say my own personal answer for this one is just paint or draw whatever is
Yeah,
most interesting to you.
yeah, I
If
agree.
something really strikes your attention and you really love it, you're going to do the best work. You're going to learn the most from it, and you're going to have a really good time doing it.
Yeah,
So, especially early on, just do whatever makes you happy. If that's doing figure drawing all day long, then do figure drawing all day long. If it's doing still lives all day long, then do still lives. I've never been too fond of having like a really set schedule. If you got to do this, you win, and because I think just following whatever is interesting to you the most at the time is probably the best route to go. Because I think you will do the best work if you kind of do it that way.
yeah, I agree completely.
Let's see here. Let's try to find some more questions here. What's your thoughts on doing concept art for indie games and stuff? I'm assuming that's kind of stuff that wouldn't be paid. What's your thought on sort of unpaid projects like that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a hot topic, and again, I don't really have a strong opinion. Part of
Yeah,
that is because I think it's all case specific.
right.
the one thing, if I've got nothing else to work on and I'm, just whatever, especially if I've just graduated and I'm looking for, projects are the new resumes,
Mhm.
as Seth Godin says. So if it's a thing where it's like some of my friends that I believe in are doing this thing and everyone's doing it for free, then that's just kind of a fun, creative thing, right? It's not really, I mean, you want to do a professional level of work, but it's not really a professional arrangement, right?
Mhm.
But I do think that it's important to have an agreement drawn up, or
Yeah.
draw up an agreement of your own early on, so that you don't lose the friendship. If there's some sort of misunderstanding about how the money would be divided up or whatever, which it will be.
Yeah.
Which there will be a misunderstanding. I can almost guarantee it.
Oh, definitely.
At least a small one. And so to try and smooth all that over early on is good, but that's different. It's different to just make something together than it is to, than this like completely awful, um, you know, p- somebody goes and posts on, your alma mater's job site, that they're looking for a muralist, to come do something, and it's like, oh, we have a budget of, I mean, I can't tell you how many like $25 oil portraits I was approached with,
Yeah.
and it's like 25. It's gonna take me an entire week,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I still get
starting
those.
out or not.
I still get emails like that people
Yeah.
expect me to do it for like $10. They're like, I got 10 or $20. Any more than that, it's pushing it. And I'm like, and I quote the rate back to them. It's so much fun to do. Like, oh, my standard rate is, this, and like,
Wow.
it's a little more than $20.
Yeah, so be just, the thing is though, is I think most of you guys have a pretty good BS detector.
Yeah.
It's like it's part of human survival, is that our BS detectors are pretty accurate. Um, I think we can get to the point where we can kind of become overly alarmist and start alienating people, which we also don't want to do. But generally, it's like, whether it's a legit thing or not.
Right. Although I will say this interesting story, it's not a story I tell very often because it was really my first paid job. It's not one.
Mhm.
It's not usually the one that I refer to as my first paid job because I like to forget about it because it all went down the toilet in the end. But my first paid job was like this little indie game, and they wanted me to do some character work of all things, and it was really low pay. And they had me do this turnaround character. They ended up like barely liking it. But I got paid for it and everything. And I was like, I didn't really care because they're just some indie game. They're probably never going to get published. And then lo
Oh
and
no.
behold, they go ahead and get published and are super popular. And the
Oh
game is
man.
the game is really successful. Everyone loves the game.
Wow.
And yeah, I was this close to actually, somehow ending up on a really good game project as my first job. But yeah, so I was one of those rare exceptions when those little indie projects turn out well, and totally screwed it up. So
Yeah,
that
it
was my
can
first
happen.
yeah that was my first job experience,
That's
which
amazing.
I like to forget about because it went
I'll
so
never
badly.
speak of it again.
Yeah. Which kind of leads into this question that I think is a really good question from Kiri. What are some of the mistakes you've made?
Oh God.
Yeah.
Where do I even start? Yeah, can you be more specific?
How about mistakes in terms of your career?
Becoming too emotionally attached to work that was for someone else.
Hmm.
That's huge.
Yeah.
The longer I was at Disney, the more of an emotional stake I had just in the ethos and in the studio and in the work. Um, and the more authority I'd been given, I mean, I was on my last couple of movies, I was taking a character from rough Sharpie sketch, that I would do, complete from here. Someone hands me a script page, and here's a line of the character description on the script page, all the way through to the VizDev painting, all the way through to where it's like being sent off to being modeled.
Oh wow.
So like you know what that's like. You get so, and especially when it's a character, it's like it has its own personality. You're helping to contribute to that, and anyway, I mean, it's like you get really attached to it. And so I had just a bunch of times, where I, would just come home and just be so upset that something had changed, and I didn't even really realize what was happening at first. I just would be kind of, just I just kind of have just have a kind of an unrest, in my mind or in my guts, I was like, man, it's just like really affecting me. I get cranky with people or whatever. I'm like, man, that's not me. It's like, dude, you need some distance here they're not real.
Yeah.
they're pretend. They're pretend.
Yeah.
And it's not my movie. Ultimately, it's like I'm not. I'm the character designer. I'm not. That's my job.
Yeah.
Just like you were saying. So yeah, But I mean, I made that mistake so many times. Many, many, many times. It's not necessarily one. Oh, there's one time. I guess it's like, oh, it's a
Right.
constant struggle.
Yeah.
Just a constant struggle.
Yeah. That's good. Here's a really good question. I think a lot of people ask. How do you deal with non-supportive parents that don't support your art career? I'll say, just to start this off, I've been super lucky. My parents were totally supportive. They love the fact that I was going to become an artist. My dad was never really allowed to take art classes growing up, so when I expressed interest in taking them, he was like, "Oh yeah, finally he can, kind of live vicariously through me." So I've always had parents that loved the idea that I wanted to be an artist, and push me in that direction. But I know a lot of people do struggle with this.
It comes up all the time.
Yeah, because they have parents that are, they're honestly just really worried about them, because their kids are going into this field that is really hard to make it in, and really hard to make a good living in. And so it's kind of a scary thing.
Well, I would actually defer to the podcast episode, my podcast episode called "The Rising Stars of Animation," and on there, Sarah Marino and Isaac Orloff, and I think maybe a couple other people contribute, but I know that Sarah and Isaac have some great contributions to the conversation, and their answers are actually way better than mine. So I would actually recommend just go listen to that episode. I don't remember what the shortcut link is to that. It might be chrisoatley.com/rising stars, but I'm not sure. But if you just search Chris Oatley Rising Stars of Animation, you can find it. And it's a great interview, and great artists on there. Anyway, and one thing that Isaac says on the show is, look around.
Yeah.
The end. It's like, look around. Professional art is everywhere.
Right.
Everywhere you turn, and it's just becoming more so, because things are created, things that contain and feature art are created at a breakneck pace now, and so there's just so much work to be had, and so many things to do, and then you add to that the fact that you can make your own stuff. And just point to Angry Birds, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Pick one. Pick a runaway success. And
right.
I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. It makes sense that I understand. Well, just like you said, Noah, where the parents are coming from,
right.
because they're thinking of it from maybe a more traditional, although it was still at the time incorrect, but a more traditional mindset. But now it's like, if you really actually look, instead of just knee-jerk reacting to your kid wants to be an artist, it's self-evident,
right,
that it's not a stupid decision.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Well, it's a stupid decision if you don't take it seriously.
It is. That's a lot of people do screw up. I always make the somewhat offensive joke that, anytime you go to a coffee shop, they're probably an art student or an art graduate. Because I hate to break it to you, but a lot of people that go to art school, a lot of people that try to be artists, don't make it as artists. And I do attribute that mainly to those people that just sit there and just don't, put the effort in. They're just not that interested.
Just give up.
Right. So, I guess that is something to think about, because I went through art school, and every day I was like terrified of being one of those graduates that failed
Me too.
after they got out. Every single day I would think about, okay, this is when I'm going to graduate. It's going to be 3 years from now, 2 years from now. And I would think about, oh my God, that's all the time I have until I need to be a professional and I need to be
Yeah.
making a living with this. And so it scared the Jesus out of me. So every day I was just busting my hide because I knew I needed to work really hard. And I would
Yeah.
see classmates and stuff like, they kind of put in the effort, they do the assignment, they turn it in late. And I just wonder, like, how do you think you're going to make it if you're not just terrified all the time? Because you're not putting in this crazy amount of work that you need to. Um, so I mean,
Well,
that's been my experience at least.
when I was a freshman, my first year at CCAD, I was with all my dorm room roommates, and we drove up to Blockbuster Video. For the youngest members of our audience, we used to have these things called video stores where you actually had to go rent a DVD. It's a disc that you put into a machine, and
I think I've been to
and
one of those. One
right, yeah,
time.
and we go to the video store, and we met this guy who was working at Blockbuster Video, and he had graduated from CCAD, and so we go in, and he's like, I think in fact he sort of spotted us right there. You know, he's like, "Are you guys art students?" And we're like, "Yeah." And he goes on without unsolicited, goes on this rant about how much of a ripoff he thinks the school is, and he hates it. And he was just so bitter,
Right.
so bitter, and it was obvious to all four of us that were there, you know, that there was something else going on here that had nothing to do with CCAD and everything to do with this guy's attitude,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I mean, one thing about art school that I guess we didn't mention is that you often get out of art school what you put into it. And
Oh, completely.
even the best art
Yep.
school, if you're not putting anything into it, it's not going to magically turn you into an amazing
Yep.
artist.
You can squander it. You could squander art center.
Yeah.
For flipping art center. You know, you could squander that. It's possible.
Yeah, it's definitely possible, and it kind of happens all the time. Um, so yeah, here's another question: how do you establish that balance between your art life and your social life? Because I know a lot of people do struggle with, how do you keep up your social life while still doing this art thing? Because it takes so much time, it takes so much of your life.
Yeah.
How have you managed to do that yourself?
I just don't know if I have, you know. Um, I mean, one thing that has worked for me, I guess, pretty well. I don't know if it has or not, but I mean, it's at least helped.
Mhm.
And that is work hard, play hard. You
Yeah,
know, so I'll have, and that my lifestyle now works a little better in that way. It's a little more, you know, so now my kind of daily routine, so to speak, is more project based.
hmm,
So, like I said, I've got this digital painting workshop coming up, and I've
right,
been working super, like ridiculously hard to
yeah,
try and get this thing ready for launch
right,
for several months now,
yeah,
and just working.
yeah,
And I'm going to launch that, and then obviously there will be some, you know, hard work in the sort of transition of getting it launched, and as new students are coming in
right,
and that kind of thing. But I mean, I'm hoping I can go at, you know, back to the South or something, and just like not. I mean, I can't do nothing for longer than about half a day before I start to lose my mind. So I
yeah,
kind of have to still, you know, draw my sketchbook and write and do blog posts and that, and interact with people online and that kind of thing. Because it's so just part of who I am. But
yeah,
as far as the like, that's what taking time off kind of looks like to me. But you know, I'm gonna do that, and you know, it's important. It's important to you know, to work toward it. I think, but it's definitely one of my biggest areas for growth. I mean, I need, you know, it's like that's one of my biggest kind of like, hey, this is, you know, starting your own business is I mean, to anybody that does that, it's crazy. You know, it's a crazy amount of work. And so there's been a part of it where I've just, you know, my wife and I and my friends have kind of just been aware that like, yeah, there's just it is sort of, there's some just huge amounts of, you know, these times where I'm just going to have to kind of be off grid, and I'm not going to be able to be at, you know, your, you know, whatever housewarming party or, you know, whatever.
yeah,
And, but you know, every single time I have to like opt out of one of those things, I'm like, man, I got to remember to like make it up to them,
yeah,
or at least try to, you know.
yeah.
It's tough.
It really is. Trying to maintain a good balance, especially when you're in art school, I find, because I mean, like then there's so much pressure to socialize all the time and have a good time. That's your time that you really need to be studying.
Right.
So, and then when you get out, you should be networking, making friends with other artists and stuff like
Right.
that. But I mean, you still need to be pouring all the time in your work. And I know what you're going through with like launching your project right now. I mean, I've gone through that a couple times now.
Yeah.
I've before launching Art of Freelancing stuff, I was just putting so many hours into that.
Oh yeah.
And then now, like I'm doing my art
Because
camp
it's
thing.
all you.
Right.
Like there's
No,
no one else.
nope.
It's not, you know.
No one's gonna come save you.
Yeah.
No one's gonna
Yeah.
do that thing for you.
Yeah.
It's all you. So
Yeah.
it is amazing how much work goes into that kind of stuff. So I can relate with that. But I guess I have managed to have something of a social life even still.
Yeah.
I do force myself to, okay, I'm going to take some time off. I'm going to do some fun. I'm going to go hang out with some people, just to recharge, get away from my work from time to time. It really is nice. It's really helpful.
I think that one thing is when you do have social time to make sure that it's actually restorative. It's easy to react, and I think this is where video games can, a lot of people. I challenge my students. I challenge lots of people to go hardcore with cutting out video games for a season, to fully focus on their work. And obviously that's rarely ever oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, it's very rarely do I get that reaction.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm not saying don't ever play another game again
Right.
ever in life. I'm just saying that it's a huge issue and you're addicted and you should stop cold turkey for a while to where it releases its grip on you, and then you actually get some perspective and you can re-enter the whole thing with a healthy approach. And the point being, though, that I think that that's one thing when and I'm not saying that everybody who plays a lot of games is addicted. I just am saying that I think that when games addiction does happen, and it is a huge problem right now, it's because we're just running away. We're just reacting to something else, as opposed to actually like, no, I'm gonna, call my buddies up and we're really gonna have a great time tonight. Or I need a Friday night with the guys to just go, shoot aliens or whatever.
Exactly. I remember I posted on I think Facebook or something, a list that H.R. Geiger's agent gave out as advice to a student. And there's a list of like 50 things to make you a better artist, and like in there was like stop playing video games. And of like all these wonderful pieces of advice, all these people on Facebook were, getting up in arms because they're like, I don't need to give up my video games. I can be an artist and play video games. I should be playing video games.
That's the first sign.
And I'm like, problem. That's not the point at all. You totally missed the whole point of the entire exercise here. And the fact that you are so militant about like continuing to play them just shows that you should probably try not playing them. See what it's like. I mean, I grew up on video games. I love video games. I still play them sometimes when I have time. But it's if you're that scared to give that up, I do question whether you necessarily have the devotion it takes to become an artist.
Yeah. Oh yeah, completely. And as a side note, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like it's okay to just be a hobbyist. And there's this, so we have so much emphasis on vocation right now, and there's so much emphasis on being a professional artist. And it's like, well, first of all, being a hobbyist artist has been around for centuries. That's that's great. It's great that you do that. It's and to be a good artist and be a hobbyist is like almost non-existent, and yet that's completely valid. It's like it's just the thing is, you would just want to make sure that you're not opting out of being a professional artist because you just want to play video games all the time. Because that's not gonna,
it's definitely missing. I mean, but you're right. Being a hobbyist artist is great, and some people I would recommend that for. You don't necessarily need to do this professionally to do art. There's actually a lot of good things about doing art on the side.
Oh yeah.
You'll do it because you love it. You never will have to do it for a boss. You'll just make whatever you want whenever you want to make it. And if you want to push your skills, you push your skills. But if you don't, then that's fine. there's a lot to be said. So don't feel too pressured that like you need to be a professional artist because everyone else is going to become one.
Yeah.
It's not the be all and end all. This question, and probably a good conversation starter. How do you handle giving critique? And I also open this up to how do you handle giving and receiving critique? Because I think there's both some etiquette to it and a bit
Yeah.
of mindset as far as critique goes.
It just all depends on who I'm talking to. I mean, if it's one of my students that where I've got, I have relationships with all of them, and a huge percentage of them have really, we've built trust,
Hmm.
So if there's a bed of trust, a cushion of trust, and something, is not working, then I mean, we just dive right in, And
Right.
this is the thing, I have a lot of students that say, rip it apart,
Hmm.
go for it. I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it doesn't need to be ripped apart. Like
Yeah.
that's not, and I feel like that's, especially on places like conceptart.org and DeviantArt, I see it all the time. People
Hmm.
think that critique equals rip it apart. And it's like, well, really, if you're an intelligent, sophisticated thinker who understands what a critique actually is, with the goal being to improve the work, then you're going to make it actionable. You're going to give them things to think about. It's a dialogue. A critique is a dialogue,
Hmm.
It's a conversation. And a lot of young artists just have completely missed the boat, just egregiously
Yeah.
missed that, and it's become this like almost emotionally violent, space, and it's terrible. It's terrible that in such a connected world and in such a connected, ethos, of art being people who are, of an increased sensitivity, default to this, kind of mean approach. So now, the healthy version of rip it apart is let's be honest.
Yeah.
And that's where I think some real health can happen. But in any relationship, it's like you have to earn trust over time in any relationship. And so if the person's a complete stranger, then it doesn't matter. Rip it apart, not rip it apart, what's good, what's bad. It doesn't matter. There's only so much bandwidth, emotional bandwidth there to be able to pass information through.
Right.
So, if it's a complete stranger, then my focus is the thing I talk about in my I have a YouTube video called "What to Do When Portfolio Feedback Doesn't Make Sense,"
Hmm.
and in that I talk about what you need as the person who has the portfolio is one actionable bit of advice. That's all you
Right.
need from the critique, and if you can basically ask good questions and get that one next action that actually, and there's other things I talk, the video's like 20 minutes long, so
Mhm.
it's obviously much more in depth than that, but that's kind of the goal. So that's what I always work on with strangers. And then I always make sure that, my critiques to my students have some sort of action, but after a while you start to kind of develop a shorthand and you start to understand each other where you can kind of say, just make it more like this, or it's missing a little bit of, or I'm using like sound effects in the critique, and
Right.
that kind of thing. And but they understand,
Mhm.
because we've developed, a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. I have similar experience because I guess there's kind of different levels of critique that I'll give out. Because
Yeah.
I run a little mentorship program that I try to keep it down to just like 4 or 5 students at any one time.
Yeah.
So I get to really know like these students' work. I get to know what will help them, what will hurt them, and really focus in my critiques on exactly the thing that I see that they need to be working on.
Yeah.
Because you kind of develop that relationship and that knowledge of like, okay, this is who they are, this is who they want to be, this is the things they struggle with, this is the
Yeah.
things they really enjoy doing, and you really get that knowledge. But if someone like, for instance, just some random student, I would say it was at an art school or something like that, and they show me their work, it's an entirely different experience because I don't know anything about them. I don't know anything about the work they've done in the past. So my critiques are just going to be based on the stuff I see right in front of me.
Right. Exactly.
So my critiques will be a lot more, I guess, in some ways general. Like, oh, maybe you need to work on your color and lighting a little bit, because I see that. But is that necessarily the best critique you could? I could possibly give that person, maybe not. Maybe that's something they're struggling with. So I think a lot of things kind of come down to what you said about asking questions. Whenever you're trying to get critique, try to really ask good questions. Because if you're ever presented with the opportunity to get a portfolio review from like a really good artist, really good art director, knowing which questions to ask is extremely helpful. Like I know I've had a couple portfolio reviews with art directors where I sat down with, for instance, John Chinetti of D&D, and I sat down for him. I was like, I want to do work for you. What exactly do I need to show you to get my work to that level? What are the few things that you need to see? And then I came back to him about a year later after getting some answers to that and working on those things like crazy. And he saw my work again, loved it, and a couple months later he gave me my first jobs. So I do advise you, if you ever do get portfolio reviews, don't just ask for critique. Really ask for specific things that you can start doing to push your work in the direction you want it to.
It's really good. You don't need that. This is the problem with things like DA and conceptart.org is there's so much post your work and just, hey, yeah, it's open for critique.
Yeah.
And it's like, who knows who that person is?
Right.
I had a student recently that just got ripped apart on DA, and he comes into the community at Oatley Academy, and he's like totally bummed out and just like having a hard day and everything. I'm like, dude, what are you even listening to those people for? Why do you even solicit their feedback? Like, just literally just forget them right now. Cut it off. Forget it. It doesn't matter. They have no idea what they're talking about, and clearly they're jabronis because they're the ones that laid into you in the first place. Right. If they'd actually had an interest in your artistic growth, they would have been constructive about it. That doesn't mean that you don't just come right out and say stuff when something's not working, but that's different. That's that they would anyway. So it's, you don't need 100 opinions.
No.
You need like one, maybe two opinions of people that actually care about you and actually have an investment in who you are.
Right.
It's like that's going to make you grow as an artist. So, we have this we at Paper Wings, which is, for those that don't know, I also do a podcast called the Paper Wings Podcast, and it's with my friend Laura Ennis, and it's about creator-owned comics and storyboards. And we talk about, and we talk a lot about personal projects there, and particularly narrative personal projects, so comics, short films, those kinds of things. And we talk about the importance of having a circle of trust, using the Meet the Parents, nomenclature there. And that I'm like, if you guys out there on conceptart.org and DA and these other places that are just like running around like chickens with your heads cut off, posting work all the time and, running back and trying to do all the creative, if you just like slow down and focus that energy on reading and finding the 3 or 4 people who are actually know what they're talking about, and forming a circle of trust with them and going like, hey guys, do you want to do this? Do you want to kind of get a little bit religious about this and be disciplined and actually build trust and be careful and that kind of thing? Then, I mean, things would just turn around like so fast for you if you get the right people,
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I've ever gotten an actual critique on DeviantArt that was helpful in the slightest. But even I get ripped apart occasionally on there. It's almost funny at this point.
Yeah. Occasionally there's a thing where like, hey, this head's too big or what. In that, I'm
and
like,
be like,
you're right.
That looks about right. But by and large, it's completely useless.
Yeah, right.
And so if I ever actually want critique on my work, I have a few friends that I would probably send it to. And my friends, they know who I am, they know my art, they know what I want to be doing, and they'll be honest with me. And they'll be like, oh, you should be working on, this. And, maybe they're nice enough to even do a paint over. It's really nice having that relationship with just a few people, because I think sometimes people are too eager to get, 100 opinions, as you said. And it's just not necessary. You don't need art by committee. You don't need critique by, the mob, because they might get 1 or 2 things right, but you're never going to make a mob happy, and they're never going to give you the absolute best critique that you need to hear. So at least in my experience, I've got friends that I trust, and they're really the only ones that I will send it to for critique.
It's awesome. Somebody asked earlier about what it's like to work at Disney. That's another really cool thing about Disney is that mentorship. There's always been a mentorship mindset since they started since the nine old men kind of started training the young
Mhm.
animators when they started to realize they weren't going to be around forever, and that kind of kicked into gear this whole paradigm of the importance of giving away what you know,
Mhm.
and mentoring the younger artists in the studio. And that's still there. The artists just, I think part of it is that those are the kinds of artists that are attracted to Disney in the first place. And conversely, those are the kinds of artists that Disney realizes, oh, these are the kinds of people that we want to have around, we want to have working here. And that's awesome because, and so I had, day one, I go in and I'm the worst artist in the studio
Right.
and I have no idea what I'm doing. But everyone is interested in helping the kid,
Yeah.
you know, everyone. And that was amazing. I mean, it was amazing to just be, you could walk 3 feet and there's this person who's been painting for 30 years, to give you feedback. And it's
Yeah.
just mind blowing. And to this day, I'll still email them, like, hey, can you look at this?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. So it looks like we've hit about 2 hours now. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about or um, discuss? Anything we didn't really mention? We hit a lot of the hot topics, I know.
Yeah, I mean, let's see. Well, I did want to say that with this digital painting workshop that I'm releasing on hopefully Tuesday, I'm giving away a free lesson from it. So if you
Nice.
go to chrisoatley.com and sign up for the newsletter, if you want a super quick route to the page where you sign up for the newsletter, go to digitalpaintingkit.com, and you'll receive all my Photoshop brushes that I made and that I use right away. And then you'll get a Key to Great Paintings email series, which is well, actually, I don't want to. I was about to spoil it, but it's a surprise what the Key to Great Paintings actually is. And you get that. That's one email a week for 11 weeks, and then you'll also get as soon as it's ready, and probably on Tuesday, you'll get the free lesson from my digital painting workshop.
Cool. That's
Yeah,
going to be pretty awesome to see. I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like.
I'm
Um,
excited.
and so, of course, to plug my own thing, I have something launching next week as well.
Yes.
I have my art camp, which looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. We started getting the group together, and it seems like a really active community. So I think it's going to be a really fun summer.
Oh,
And of course, I've been like recording all the content and putting that together, and I'm really excited to get started with this. So
dude.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I want to say that too, is that there are a few people I feel like I can kind of recklessly recommend as teachers because just because you're a good painter doesn't mean necessarily that you're a good teacher
Oh,
or a
absolutely.
good communicator verbally. And that's something that I think art students, you and I were talking at the top of the show about the importance of like Frankensteining your own art education. That's something to really look out for, is if you're going to drop $500 or $600 or $1,000, as some of
Yeah.
these courses are, on a course,
Mhm.
do some research on the teacher first. Like, does what they're doing resonate with you? Do you understand them, for crying out loud? Are they a good communicator? I
Yeah.
mean, that those are the kinds. There's actually a blog post that you can read called "When Successful Artists Give Bad Advice,"
Mhm.
and that's on my site as well. But the point is that I love you so much, Noah. You're such a good communicator, man, and you're such a good painter. And anyway, any student would just be so fortunate to be able to learn from you. I am so glad that you're doing what you're doing. It's great to be able to just go, oh yeah, Noah, and
Yeah.
not have to add any stuff to it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it, and that's part of the reason I wanted to get you on here so badly, is that I've seen over the years the stuff you've been putting out, and it's been really nice to see because just like you, I've heard from a lot of students and aspiring artists amazing things about the content you're putting out, and you as a teacher. And when I sent out to my Art of Freelancing people that I was going to get to do a talk with you, they were ecstatic. They were absolutely thrilled because
Oh,
some of them I think are in your program and they
Mhm.
really love the stuff you say. They love your podcast. So it was really nice getting to connect like that.
Ah,
So
bromance.
yeah, online bromance. All right. Yeah, that's not weird at all. So let's go ahead and wrap this up.
Sweet.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you again so much for doing this.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it. Be sure to check out Chris's work, Chris's workshop, Chris's school, all the stuff Chris does. ChrisOatley.com, and of course my stuff at NoahBradley.com. And look out for our exciting releases coming next week.
Woohoo!
All right, see y'all later.
Bye.